So it's mid-September and summer is definitely over. The main concern on my mind is getting my plants ready for winter. So even though they are houseplants, they're not subject to those cold temperatures outside. They do need a little bit of a TLC going into those colder months as they go into kind of a dormant mode. So less growth, slower growth, no blooming for the most part. Essentially, they're storing up all their energy for next spring when they start that period of rapid growth. So I want to give my plants the best shot at a really energetic and just strong, powerful next spring. So we're going to talk about a few of the things that I do to get them ready for that. The first thing I do is trim the trailing plants. So we're talking peperomias, we're talking pothos, some of my philodendron, the heartleaf philodendron that you can see in the background. This breaks my heart a little bit to do because they've put out, all this growth over the spring and summer. So proud of them. But over the winter, when they go into that dormancy mode, we want all their energy, all their strength to be kind of conserved in the roots and in the main body of the plant. So we don't want them to have to send energy all the way out through that vine to these tiny leaves at the end here. We want to give the plant the best shot at conserving energy and having a strong spring. So you see, I've got the plant, I've got the vine. What I'm going to do is trim this vine on the non-plant side of a node. Okay? So I've got the plant. Each of these spots where the leaves branch out of the stem, that is a node, and I'm going to trim on the non-plant side. How much do I trim, you ask? It's kind of up to you. I like to at least go, 50% of the way down, at least halfway down. So I think I'm going to trim about right there. So you can see I've got my scissors on the non-plant side, and I'm going to trim that. Okay? So much shorter there, and then I've got a propagation. Sometimes I do propagate these just because I can't stop propagating, and probably 60% of the plants I own were started from propagation. So you could propagate this, but you definitely don't have to. So I'm going to go through and trim all these up and get her ready for winter. Another one I like to trim, well, it's not just one because I have a bunch of them, but pothos. I don't like a leggy pothos anyway. I like them to be bushy like this. I don't really care for the trailing. So I don't have any qualms about cutting her. I do it in a heartbeat. But you can see there are a couple vines here. Trim her up. Again, you can propagate this. Sometimes I'll propagate these in water and then stick them right back in the plant to encourage kind of that bushier growth, that fuller looking plant. But pothos. So after I've trimmed up the plants that need trimming, I need to look at the plants that might need repotting. I've got this Golem Jade as an illustration of one plant that might need to be repotted. And a big sign of that is look how big the plant is compared to the pot. So this plant is starting to outgrow the pot. It's probably starting to get a little root bound. The way this pot is, I wouldn't be able to see roots growing out of the bottom. It's got a little drainage reservoir in the bottom of it. But if you see roots starting to grow out the bottom of the pot, that means probably that it is root bound. The roots don't really have anywhere to go, and you would probably want to repot that type of plant. Another sign that your plant might need to be repotted is if you see the soil pulling away from the edges of the pot. That means that the soil can't hold water anymore. You need new soil. Also, you'll notice this soil is kind of lighter in color. There's probably a lot of mineral deposits in there. I have hard water, so that soil is probably pretty nutrient depleted. So that's another sign that I would want to repot. Also, this doesn't have any drain holes, so I want to get some drain holes in there for the winter so it doesn't just sit with wet feet with that water in the bottom of the pot. This Hoya is another example of a plant that's getting too big for its pot, so I'd probably want to repot that. One thing about this, when we repot, we're not getting crazy big in the size of the pot. So we just want to go 1 inch to 2 inches bigger in the size of the pot. This would probably be just another inch bigger. It's a small plant. Something like the Golem Jade that I showed you at first, that we could probably bump up 2 inches bigger. So we're not getting crazy. We just need a little extra room for the roots to settle in and gather their strength for next spring. Of course, we want to make sure that we have drain holes in any pot that we choose. So whether you drill them or they're already in there, we want to make sure we have drain holes. To throw something else in the mix, some plants are more tolerant to being root bound, to being kind of snug in their pot. Succulents are notorious for being okay with being a little bit root bound. So if you're on the fence, not sure to pot or repot, if you've got a succulent, if you've got something tolerant like a pothos or a snake plant, those are all pretty tolerant plants and they're probably going to do just fine settling in over the winter, and you can pot them in the spring. One last note on this, if you just got a new plant, so you're at maybe kind of one of those more boutique plant shops that sell houseplants year-round, no matter your climate, it is probably not root bound because they get regular deliveries of those plants. It's probably not root bound. It's probably going to be just fine staying in the pot that you purchased it in, staying in that pot all winter long. So if you just got a pot, I would say keep it in there until spring. Unless there are obvious signs of it being root bound, like roots coming out the bottom, it's probably going to be just fine in that pot. And if you want to repot it, you can do it in the spring. Another thing that I do getting my plants ready for the spring, and since we're on the subject of potting, I pot all my water propagated plants. So you can see I've got this Schefflera, actually 2 Scheffleras. Both of them have pretty well established roots in there. That's actually kind of gross. I am notorious for propagating plants and then I forget about them. They stay in the water indefinitely. Pothos actually do really well with that. Snake plants, Schefflera, they really do fine in the water. This one definitely needs some nutrients and I need to just change the water. Ashley, you're being gross. But yes, we want to get these potted before the winter. I'm probably going to put these in the same pot, just keep them all together so that I'm not shocking either one with a big new pot. I've also got a couple little peperomia, got a Rhaphidophora, I always stumble over that name, Rhaphidophora hongkongensis. So you can see she's got some hardy little roots on there. They're very firm, not mushy. So you do want to check the roots. If they're mushy to the touch, that means they're not great roots. They're not going to do well. So you want to make sure the roots are firm to the touch. So this is perfect, all ready for being potted. And couple little heartleaf philodendron, again, pretty established roots in there, all ready to be potted and settle in for winter. Something else I'm going to do for my plants, again, we're getting ready for winter, getting ready for that dormant stage. What I'm going to do is wipe off the leaves. So they're probably a little dusty. Maybe you forgot, or I know I forget to clean the leaves on a regular basis. And you probably had the windows open, in this mild time in the fall, probably had the windows open, some dust got in, some pollen, whatever. Wiping the leaves off is going to help your plant take advantage of as much sunlight as it can, even in these lower light levels as we go into fall and winter. I like to use an old t-shirt. That way it's very gentle, but also absorbent. So you can use an old t-shirt with just a little bit of water. I like to use an old t-shirt and neem oil. The benefit of neem oil is it's gonna do double duty. So it's gonna clean off those leaves and also act as some pest control. So of course we're headed into winter, not many bugs are gonna hang around, but since we are indoors, those bugs have a higher chance of living. They're not subject to those, those killing temperatures outside. So neem oil can help with pest control. It doesn't smell the best. In fact, it smells kind of rank. That puts a lot of people off. Totally understand if that's you. Water and an old t-shirt will do just fine for your plants. Just a note, I am doing this for my larger leafed plants. I don't know if I mentioned that. So the fiddle leaf fig, of course, all of my monsteras, I'm not doing this for like my pothos and, my peperomias. No, I might hose those off a little bit, but for the most part, this is just the bigger leaf plants that have less leaves, but bigger surface area, so they need to be able to take advantage of all the surface area of each of those leaves. One of the other big things I do to get my plants ready for winter involves these succulents, and I'm actually not going to do it. So of course these are houseplants. They go inside for the winter, as opposed to like my hanging begonias or hanging baskets. They're not gonna come inside for the winter. These will come inside for the winter. They've been outside all summer since late spring. They've had some explosive growth. They've really grown a lot, taking advantage of really great sunlight coming from the east. I want them to be able to take advantage of as much sunlight as they can. So I'm not gonna bring them in just yet because the temperatures here in eastern Pennsylvania have still been in the upper 50s, low 60s at night. I will probably wait until it gets to the low 50s at night to bring them in. I don't want it to really get past 50. Being that these are tropical plants, they are pretty sensitive and can get shocked pretty easily. So I'm gonna wait until about the low 50s just so they can take advantage of as much of that really rich sunlight while they're out here. Because in the winter, of course, they're not gonna get much. A couple things I'm gonna do before I bring them in. I'm going to give them a hose off, so just a gentle hose off. I see a few spider webs, a few cobwebs on here. I wanna get those off. I'll check, just do kind of an overview, check for bugs, any like white fuzzy spots, that would be mealy bugs. Just an overall check for bugs. Then I'll repot any that need to be repotted. We talked about repotting plants, things to look for. I'll look for those things, those signs in these pots, kind of that soil pulling away from the edge of the pot, just depleted soil, that pale color. This soil actually looks pretty good. I probably won't be repotting these. Again, succulents are pretty tolerant, so they could tolerate being a little bit root bound over the winter. So if you're kind of on the fence, pot or repot, I would say just leave them in their pot for now. You can repot in the spring. The other thing I'm gonna do when I do bring them in, I'm gonna still keep them all kind of together. Interior environments, I know my home included, whether you've got the air on or whether you've got central heat, those interior environments tend to be drier than outside. So I'm gonna keep them all together so that they can kind of help retain moisture. I'm also gonna keep them away from my other houseplants. So maybe at least for a week, probably for about 2 weeks, I'm gonna keep them in their own little area just to make sure I don't see any further signs of bugs or anything that could spread to my other houseplants. Something else I might also do that just occurred to me before I bring them in, this jade in particular she's just had tons of growth. This one too, really leggy. I mean, it's really great growth, but I might trim them up a little bit. Some of these branches are just so long and they've got a bunch of little leaves at the end of them, but I might trim them up just so then that plant doesn't have to send all those nutrients all the way out to the ends of those limbs. That'll help, like we talked about trimming plants earlier in this video, that will help the plant kind of conserve its energy and build up its energy for that rapid growth come next spring.